The interesting thing about the Quran compared to other sacred texts is the fact that the Quran makes the claim that its contents are revealed. That is to say that its contents are sent down from heaven, and so it places its point of origin in heaven. The idea that the Quran was sent down, for example, is mentioned in the Quran, Surah 2, verse 185. And the fact that the Quran makes the claim that it cannot be imitated, that it cannot be copied in any way, that you cannot bring forward anything like it, that you cannot bring a surah like unto one of the surahs, as we read in the Quran, Surah 17, verse 88. And it even says that you cannot even imitate the ayat, that is the verses within the Quran. Now, the Quran also makes the claim that its source is from the heavenly tablet, from the Kitab, the mother of the book, as we read in Surah 85, verse 21. It makes this claim that it is purely heavenly. It is a heavenly book that was sent down to Muhammad through the agency of the angel Jibreel. Now, the question that we want to look at, of course, is the Quran really a book that is purely heavenly? That is to say that it is a book like no other, which it claims to be. And is the Quran a book that its sources are unique? That is, that there's no way that you can compare them to anything in literature. Well, the fact of the matter is, when we read the Quran, and any critical eye can find this, when we read the Quran, we find this very interesting text in Surah 25. In Surah 25, we read this, verses 4 to 6. It says, "But the misbelievers or the unbelievers say, not is this," that is the Quran, "not is this but a lie which he has forged," that's Muhammad, "and others have helped him at it. In truth," the Quran responds, "it is they who have put forward an iniquity and a falsehood. And they say," that's the unbelievers, "tales of the ancients which he has caused to be written, and they are dictated before him morning and evening. Say," verse 6, "the Quran was sent down by him who knows the mystery that is in the heavens and the earth. Verily, he is oft forgiving, most merciful." I want you to notice something in this passage from the Quran in Surah 25, verses 4 to 6. The Quran records for us the criticism of those who heard Muhammad. When Muhammad would repeat these verses from the Quran, and he would talk about various stories in the Quran, the people of his day would say to him, "Listen, we've heard this all before. These are just tales of the ancients. These are just stories that the ancients would talk about, and we're familiar with them. And all you've done is you've just copied these stories down." Now, what is interesting, of course, is that the Quran actually records this. Why would the Quran record this charge? Well, in Surah 68 and verse 15, the Quran says this, that when our revelations are recited unto him, that is Muhammad, he says, that is the unbelievers, mere fables of the men of old. So notice again the Quran repeats this charge that the stories that Muhammad is reciting are stories that are from the men of old. That is, these are familiar stories. Now, if the stories are heavenly in origin, that is to say, if these stories are unique and that they come from God, then how is it that people are familiar with these stories? They've heard of these stories before. There's nothing new under the sun here. Well, in Surah 16, verses 103 and 105, it says this, "We know indeed that they say, it is a man that teaches him," that's Muhammad. "The tongue of him they wickedly point to is notably foreign, while this is Arabic, pure and clear. It is those who believe not in the signs of God that forged falsehood. It is they who lie." Now notice it says here in this passage, it gives us a bit of a clue as to who the person is that was believed to have been feeding Muhammad these stories. Notice it says there that The tongue of him they wickedly point to is notably foreign. Now, it's a fact that one of Muhammad's companions, not one of the close companions like Abu Bakr and Uthman and Omar and etc. We're talking here about someone who was known to him. He was known to have a friendship with a Persian-speaking person, someone who was a native Persian speaker. And the story here is relating to this person, this Persian, who apparently was giving Muhammad these revelations or these stories that were put into the Quran. And notice it says that his tongue is foreign, while this, that is the Quran, is Arabic, pure and clear. So the Quran in 3 places, in Surah 25, Surah 68, and Surah 16, acknowledges the charge that unbelievers are leveling against Muhammad, namely the charge that the contents of the Quran, particularly the stories found in the Quran, are really nothing new at all. And notice how the Quran says that this has been sent down, and it is the unbelievers who have forged a falsehood against Muhammad. And so what the Quran essentially is doing is it is defending its claim to be a heavenly text, that is, a text that is eternal. Now remember, in Islam, the Quran is an eternal text. The word of Allah is an eternal word. And therefore, this eternal word was sent down and became a book. Now here's where we run into some problems. The problem is that when we start looking at some of the stories that we find in the Quran, what we find is that many of these stories are clearly traceable to other stories that predate the Quran. That is, they come from texts that were in existence prior to the writing of the Quran. And they come to us from various sources. They come to us from Jewish sources. They come to us from Christian folklore sources. They come to us from Persian sources. They come to us from Arabic folklore as well. And they come to us from Zoroastrian sources too. So we have to ask the question, once again, if this book is a divine book, that all of its contents have been revealed, they've been sent down from Allah, then how is it that the Quran stories do seem to be a repetition of these former stories that we find in other literature? In other words, are the unbelievers, are the disbelievers correct when they said to Muhammad, this is nothing new, Muhammad. We've heard this all before. These are simply stories of the ancients that have been rehearsed to you. Well, let's take a look. The first thing we want to look at is, are there any sources in the Quran that we could trace to Jewish sources? Well, in fact, there is. If you go to Surah 5 and verse 31, we have in that story the story of the bearing of Abel when Cain had killed his brother Abel. We're told there that Cain did not know how to dispose of the body of his brother Abel. And so in Surah 5 verse 31 it says, then Allah sent a raven who scratched the ground to show him, that's Cain, how to hide the shame of his brother. Woe is me, said he, was I not even able to be as this raven and to hide the shame of my brother? Then he became full of regrets. So in this story in the Quran, we have the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain slays his brother Abel, and Cain wants to know how he should dispose of his brother's dead body. And here in the story, it says that Allah sent forth a raven to scratch the ground and show Cain how to bury his brother. Well, is this story unique? Is it original to the Quran? Well, no, it's not. Because in the Jewish text known as the Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah, this was a text known as the Targums or the Targumim. These are Aramaic texts that were written long before the Quran. And notice what this story says. This is from Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah. Adam and Eve, sitting by the corpse, that is of Abel, wept, not knowing what to do, for they had as yet no knowledge of burial. A raven came up, took the dead body of its fellow, and having scratched at the earth, buried it thus before their eyes. Adam said, "Let us follow the example of the raven." So taking up Abel's body, buried it at once. And so in the story, you will notice here that in the Quran you have Cain learning from the raven, but in this Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah, it's Adam and Eve who see the raven scratching the ground, and it's from this story that they learn how to dispose properly of the body of Abel. The coincidence that this would have just been a happenstance is very high. In other words, the story of how to properly bury the dead that we find in Cain and Abel in the Quran is exactly what you find in the story of the Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah. Another example is that found in Surah 5, verse 32, continuing on this story. And this surah is usually quoted by our Muslim friends to show that the Quran regards all life as sacred. And in there it says, in Surah 5, verse 32, "On that account we ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew the whole people or the whole world. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the whole people or the whole world." And we usually hear this text being quoted to show how the Quran has this very high regard for human life. And of course, this text is not necessarily referring to the value of all human life. This text has been interpreted by various Islamic commentators to refer to the life of Muslims. And in this text, we also have the call to jihad for those who spread mischief in the land, for instance. This text calls on various punishments that those who do this mischief in the land should face. So, this saying that saving a single life is the equivalent of saving the whole world. Is this unique to the Quran? Is this something that we only find in the Quran? And the answer to that is, again, no, it is not. This idea of saving a life is like saving the whole world comes right out of the Mishnah, the Jewish Mishnah. And it comes out of Sanhedrin, which is one of the books in the Mishnah. And this is what it says. "We find it said in the case of Cain, who murdered his brother, 'The voice of thy brother's blood crieth out.'" And this is taken from the Bible, Genesis chapter 4, verse 10. And he says, "It does not say he hath blood in the singular, but bloods in the plural. Thou wast created single in order to show that to him who kills a single individual, it would be reckoned that he has slain the whole race. But to him who has preserved his life of a single individual, it is counted that he has preserved the whole race." So you see, the idea of saving a life, it's like he saved the whole world, is taken right out of the Mishnah, which was written centuries before the Quran was written. So far we've seen two examples here of where the Quran is clearly borrowing a story that you find within its pages that is clearly linked to external sources. In the Quran, you have also these little stories that we find throughout. For example, we have the story of Ibrahim breaking the idols and being thrown in the fire by Nimrod. And we read that in the Quran, Surah 21, verses 51 to 71. So this was a very common story, a very famous story of Abraham breaking the idols and being thrown into the fire. So what we're going to do is, in our second episode, we are going to continue on this very topic. We're going to look at some other sources that the Quran has borrowed from. And so as we move along, what we find in these stories is that the Quran really is not recording anything new at all, but that it has been copied from other sources.